Hey guys, I'm Professor Maya Vries, and I'm here to talk about some books today. It probably comes as no surprise that I love a good mythic story. I've talked about myth on the channel before and how myth is an incredibly important part of the human experience. We think about myths sometimes as a falsehood or as a lie, but what myths really are truth-bearing stories. They're stories that tell important truths about a people, even if the details of the story aren't exactly what could have happened in reality, right? They're not journalism, they're not history, but they convey truths that journalism and history just can't. They convey the values of the community for whom they're important. And one of my favorite myths is the myth of King Arthur. I know that some people think it's a legend and not a myth, and that's fine. I generally think it's kind of tedious to get into what the difference is and why the difference matters. But King Arthur has been part of the Anglophone world, the English-speaking world, for a very long time, even though one of the most important King Arthur texts, the Mort du Arthur by Thomas Malory, that's in French. So a lot of the Arthur classic ideas that we get, the knights and the troubadours and the swords and the jousting, that all comes from a Frenchman. But there probably was an actual Arthur. He was probably a Welsh warlord of some kind, and the only reason why we know this, and this is so cool to me, the only reason why we know this is because there's this poem, this Welsh poem from the 6th century, I believe, 6th century CE. And there's just this one throwaway line in the poem. The whole poem is about this amazing king and how great he is and how his people loved him and how he was victorious in battle. And it was all this praise, praise, praise be to this king. But there's one line that just says, but he was no Arthur. I love that. I love that so much, right? What does that mean? It means that whoever was writing knew that whoever was going to read this knew exactly who Arthur was, knew that Arthur was a standard that no one was ever going to meet. He was the pinnacle of kingship. And so even though this king that this poem is about was so amazing, he was no Arthur. Anyway, I love stuff like that. If you're interested in actual scholarship about Arthuriana, which is what it's called, by the way, how cool is that? Arthuriana. There are so many amazing scholars. There's one person in particular I love. Her name's Dorsey. Sorry if I tapped that. Her name's Dorsey Armstrong, and she is a established professor, but she also does these really cool great course lectures. And she does one entirely, I think, on Arthur, and then she does a bunch of other stuff on like medieval history, but she even runs a journal. There's an academic journal on Arthuriana. I mean, who knew, right? I guess now you, I know, now you. So if you're interested in the actual scholarship, the Geoffrey of Monmouth, the Thomas Malory kind of thing, then go check out her work. Today, I'm talking about fun stuff. So if you've ever read The Mort du Arthur, which I'm assuming you haven't, I tried, man, but there's so much detail about jousting in that book. Like, would you like to know every tiny little thing about jousting and horsemanship and medieval knight whatever it is that knights do? Because if so, Geoffrey of Monmouth, not Geoffrey of Monmouth, Thomas Malory totally has you covered, but man, is it tedious. So these are fun books. These are not tedious books. And I've been on a little bit of a kick, so I've been reading them throughout the summer, and I want to share them with you. So the first one, I think, is one you can't not talk about if you're going to talk about Arthur, and that's the Once and Future King. This is by T.H. White. If you are familiar with Disney's Sword in the Stone, this is that. So this is where Arthur gets turned into a fish and, takes on various other animals, beings, so that he can learn lessons with Merlin. And it's funny and it's goofy. There's nothing really challenging about this book. It's probably great to read to kids because, again, it's goofy, it's funny. There's so much silliness in it that I think is really fun. a little less silly, but also really, really good, is this one here. This is new-ish. Sorry if it's shiny. A lot of these are going to be library books because I love my library. So this is Lev Grossman's The Bright Sword. This book was so good. You can see it's a little bit of a commitment, but it's a commitment that's worth your time. Lev Grossman wrote The Magicians, if you're familiar with that graphic novel, and I don't remember what streaming service it's on, but the show is like, it's so messed up though, guys. Like, it's so good, but you're just like, oh my God. But it's good. But so this is the same guy. So Lev Grossman wrote The Bright Sword. This is an Arthurian retelling. It's amazing. The characters are so fleshed out that you sort of feel like these are the way the characters always should have been. Like, you're meeting Guinevere and you're meeting Lancelot and you're meeting these other characters that you're so familiar with, but it feels like Lev Grossman somehow managed to like get them as they should have always been, which I just think is so cool. Also, some great queer representation in this book. If that's something that you're interested in, Lev Grossman's always really super good at that, and this one doesn't disappoint on that note or any other. Also, queer representation and much shorter, Spear. I loved this book. This book was so good. Spear was, and look how short. You can totally do this. You can do this in an afternoon. I mean, maybe not an afternoon. You could do this in a weekend. It's so good. I love that Nicola Griffith I've never read her before, but Nicola Griffith has this way of writing that is in keeping with the theme of the content itself. So it's a book about magic and this kind of Arthurian milieu, and so the writing itself has a kind of spell-like quality to it, and I just think that that's so brilliant and so smart and just really, really enjoyable. So Spear, also a good one. And finally, and my favorite, my absolute favorite on this was so unexpected, and this is Ishiguro's The Buried Giant. So Ishiguro wrote The Remains of the Day, which I've never read. I saw the movie with Anthony Hopkins. I thought it was a little boring, but that's kind of in line with his style. This is a slow burn. It's not a super action-packed, knights and jousting kind of story. In fact, it is an Arthurian story. It definitely sits within that tradition, but Arthur and Merlin, they're like these ghosts that sort of haunt the story. They're these specters that are giving structure and origin to the story, but not actually as characters. So the characters are actually an older couple, probably in their 70s, named Axel and Beatrice. And we follow Axel and Beatrice as they go on this sort of quest. I'm not going to give anything away, but they're living in a place that's struggling with a curse. So if you're familiar with the Fisher King, with the Arthurian legend, there's always a land that's cursed. So that's hopefully not a spoiler. Their land is cursed in some way, and they are trying to figure out how to make that curse go away. And it's a wonderful meditation on marriage and the way that memory shapes our long-term relationships. Memory is a major theme in this book, and why we remember what we remember, and the benefits perhaps of losing some of our memories. When I was reading this, I kept hearing this quote I once read from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was once asked what was the success, or what was the secret of success for her long, happy marriage. And she said something like, you have to be a little bit deaf, which I just thought was really funny, right? But that's true of all long-term relationships, right? It's like, you have to learn to let the stuff that doesn't matter go. Otherwise, you're just in for misery, right? So this is a book that's about maybe the things that we don't want to remember, the things that our spouses do to us, that our people in our lives do to us that we wish we could forget, and whether or not it's worth remembering them, or whether or not there's value in holding on to stories just for the sake of holding on to them, or whether or not it's better to let them go and to selectively forget. So it's a wonderful book. It's definitely worth your time. The Buried Giant. Sorry again for the shininess, but yeah, get it from your library, get it from a bookstore. I don't know, audiobooks, whatever. It's great. It's totally worth your time. Okay, that's it for me today, and this is probably it for Arthuriana. So we'll pick up with other myths and other books and other reading religion stuff and the next time. Okay, see you later.